So what does Dr. Jordan Peterson, along with Canadian commentator Rex Murphy, well, what do they think about Trudeau's martial law and unconstitutional freezing of bank accounts?
So this morning, I don't know what to make of all of this because it's happening so quickly. I can't believe the state to which the country is degenerated. I've been in contact with a reliable source within the Canadian military, and he told me today by email that if I had any sense, I'd take my money out of the Canadian banks because the situation is far worse than I've been informed. And so that's just one of many such messages I receive on a daily basis. So let's talk about the bank. So here's what our Prime Minister did last week. He permanently destroyed 20% of the population's faith in the entire Canadian banking system and stained the Canadian banking system's international reputation, I would say, for decades. And in any normal time, that in itself would have been enough to constitute sufficient grounds for a non-confidence vote for the government to be ousted. And that's only one of the 7 things that happened last week that are of that magnitude. You can't even keep up with them. And so let's talk about this emergency for a minute. So, I talked to Brian Peckford, the former Premier of Newfoundland, a couple of weeks ago about the fact that the mandates themselves weren't justifiable under essentially the emergency clause in the Charter, which allows for the suspension of certain basic rights under certain conditions. The mandates themselves weren't justifiable, especially now. And now the ante has been raised to a tremendous degree because we have a new emergency, which is apparently more serious than the entire COVID pandemic, that justifies the imposition of martial law and the seizing of bank accounts and the retroactive definition of crime and all of this. And so I'll ask you to play devil's advocate, okay, just for a minute. So imagine that you're on the side of Trudeau and the Trudeau government, and you're trying to make the case that this is an emergency that justifies the imposition of martial law. So what's the emergency exactly? Give me some evidence that there's an emergency of any sort.
Even if, and I accept the challenge to be a devil's advocate, let me really try. What is the thing that is making the Canadian state tremble to the point of its own dissolution? Are all the provincial capitals under seizure? No, I don't think so. Oh, I got it. The Russians are coming down from the north, and they've got a fleet of the highest gunnery, and no, it's not that either. Maybe it's inflation, and if we kill the truckers, we ruin the truckers, we can take. Look, even trying to be advocate. Okay, great imposition. I'll go that far. Great imposition on the kind of comfort and tranquility of Ottawa, but there's been an awful lot of imposition on the tranquilities of every person in this country for the last 2 years. You couldn't visit your sick mother if she was in an old age home. You cannot. Look, Christopher Freeland is supposed to be bright. And Mr. Lametti, after some of the things he's been saying, I have to hold judgment on. Where's the threat? There isn't one. This was the longest, most sustained, and almost, you can read it and you can see the live pictures from people who are not in the news media. It was even an almost celebratory thing. If even a delegation of the Trudeau cabinet had walked down the streets of Ottawa, had enough of parkers that they could sit outdoors and spend 2 hours talking to some of these real people, this could have been washed away. So even advocatus diabolus, I cannot do it because I cannot even in fantasy.
The young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, half of this cabinet, are actually young noble leaders of the world economic forum. We penetrate the cabinets.